let's go live. We've got plenty of shit to do today. We're going to be just sketching and drawing a lot of stuff, which is going to be hopefully fun. Maybe not. We'll see. I don't know how interesting this is going to be from like a viewing perspective, but this is something that I needed to do sooner or later. It's been a while since I've used this program to begin with, so I'm going to need to do some getting used to here. But the basic idea here is this is just like a vector drawing program, so I can infinitely zoom in, which is nice for making these maps. Also, now I immediately like have an asset that I can use in videos. So this here is the central room in the game, and also I probably should stop the encoding on my podcast. Hold on a moment. Let's let's pause that. Maybe not a great idea to keep that going while I'm also live streaming. So this is the central room where you start after the tutorial. So far, I've sketched out this one dungeon, which for the most part we have made. The only things that we need to do is add a little bit more like content and some art assets and stuff like that, of course. And then we need to have like what used to be the puzzle room, which I'm now going to be changing to the minigame room. So I need to think of a minigame to put in here. And then I need to make the boss room itself. And the boss room in each case is going to be like at the very furthest away, so that they're actually far away from each other to get to them. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be starting the other rooms. And for all that, I need to... That's a really good sound actually to record at some point. For that, I also need to see images. No, why is that in concept art? I don't know. At some point, somewhere, I used to have a simplified image of this. So let's see if we can get that open as well. I'm assuming that's in the game dev caves, and then in like a let's make 2022 is when I started this. Man, it's been a long time, hasn't it? I think it's probably in assets, concepts, world layout, boss weaknesses. And that's going to start up Photoshop. So let's give that a moment. So, okay. We have the Scythe dungeon, the purple one, which is up top in Inkscape now. And then we've got all these other weapons. This one is supposed to be a spear. I'm still thinking about changing that to something else because I don't really like it being a spear. I don't really have any creative ideas for like animations and attacks and moves for that. All the rest I do have. The question is, where should we start drawing? And I think we should just draw either in this direction or in this direction from the dungeon that we already have, because we have like one door into this dungeon and one door into this dungeon from our purple dungeon. And since I don't really have an idea as to what to do with the spear yet, as far as other weapons go, maybe we start with the Warhammer dungeon. That makes sense to me. Because this is supposed to be more so like the catacombs of this entire area. I know that this shield dungeon is going to be the armory. So there's going to be like a lot more metalworking, like anvils, forges, that kind of thing in here for art assets. These are likely going to be like barracks, training areas and such for the dual swords. I don't really have like a theming much to go with the axe, the hammer, and whatever the spear ends up being replaced by, because I think I'm going to replace the spear. So logically speaking, mapping out these two dungeons would make the most sense. So maybe we just start with those anyway, even though they won't be connected up, but we can make them connect. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. But we can make them connect up later, right? So let's start with the yellow one. And I think in some way I'm supposed to be able to rotate. That's definitely not it. How do you rotate this again? I forget. There is some way to just rotate the entire canvas. I just need to figure out how. It's been months since I've opened this project, or this software altogether. So let me look it up real quick. Inkscape, rotate, canvas. Control, Shift, roll mouse wheel. Yeah, that does not seem to be doing too much. I'm gonna be real with you. Or use the plus and minus widgets in the bottom right corner. I don't see this one. Oh, there we go. Okay. You know, it's not ideal, but it'll do. It works. So, how's everybody doing today? If I'm right, I don't care. We've got this thing rotated now. So, layers and objects. We've got purple dungeon. We can make another layer this way, and we'll call this yellow dungeon. Do I have these separated in? I do not. That's a very good thing, so I'm not going to bother with that. I was going to say, do I have these separated up in like different rooms as well? So, what we need is, first and foremost, I need a brush. Which I think is just this, right? Yes. So we're going to have a boss room at the very top. I just need to remind myself roughly how big I made everything in the other one. Actually, let's just zoom out a little bit. Does that work? Good enough for me. It's just a sketch anyway, so if it ends up being a little bit bigger or smaller in the actual game, it doesn't really matter. Let's just draw this guy like this. Gets the point across. That's the most important part. What is this template? This is just the basic layout of the entire game, just being sketched very, very quickly, because all this is a visual game design document. That's all that this is. So we have the boss room here, which means that we need a room leading into the boss room beforehand. Let's put that on the... Let's take a look. Makes a certain amount of sense that these would be connected to each other, because this is like the armory where presumably you'd also be making the weapons, and this is where those get used. So it makes some amount of sense to me to have a room like in here that connects up. And then do we have like an eraser? Surely we have an eraser, right? Why are these icons so goddamn small on this side of the screen? This looks like an erasing icon. Is it? Kind of is. Yeah, let's just draw that again, actually, because this is just a fucking mess. Yeah, that works. That works. Once again, it's been a while since I've used Inkscape, so it's gonna take a little bit of getting used to. Hey, give you ice. Come on. So what we have is like one room all the way over here. which then connects up to that. And that will... What is the shortcut for that eraser? Does it show when I hover over it? Surely it has to show when you hover over it, right? Shift E. And what is the shortcut for the brush? B. That makes sense. So we'll remove a bit of the wall here. That'll be the entrance. I said we'll remove a little bit of the wall here. That'll be the entrance. That'll work. Thank you very much. And this will just be like the entrance room to the boss itself. Then we need to place down 3 areas where we can get the keys to the boss. Now, what I'm thinking is the combat trial for this one is going to be, instead of a huge amount of separate enemies like I've been doing so far, I want to make some of the combat trials also into mini bosses instead, which is going to be a lot more work for me, but it'll be fun. So that's what we're going to do. And I think it makes sense for that one to be in the center. That said, I also have the combat trial for this one relatively in the center. But maybe that can just be a common thread. I don't know. This one doesn't necessarily have to be in the center, but I've already built it at this point, so I'm not going to change it. It's a very, very good question. Is that a problem? I don't really think that's a problem. So, because what I'm thinking is that we could have like a like in the middle here. It's a very ugly room, which also isn't being drawn at all, apparently. In the middle here, we could have like the actual forge. Does it not draw them when you close the... Ah, that's interesting. So don't close out the line, is what I'm hearing. We'll have the actual forge, right? Which will have like a mini boss defending it, and then we can get the key out of the forge or just out of the mini boss. I don't really care. So we'll just draw a key here, and write combat. That's not an A. Combat. There we go. My handwriting isn't good at the best of times. Doing it on a drawing tablet does not improve matters. So that'll be relatively a centered room. We need something to connect up from here to here. So we can make, let's make like an L-shaped room here, which can be a little bit of like platforming involved in it. It's a very ugly sketch, I am aware. And let's make sure we draw these things at least somewhat with walls in them. And we'll worry about what platforming this gets later. For now, let's just write plat in them so that we know that it's going to be platforming. There's not going to be the platforming trial though. I want that somewhere else entirely. And I think for this one it might not be... I'm also thinking we need to have a like entrance room. Would it be too much to have the entrance room already contain one of the keys in this case? I think for this specific dungeon it would be, because the shield is potentially... I need to like playtest this once it's implemented, but maybe I should just implement all the weapons first before doing all this. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea. Well, we're doing this now, so too fucking late for that. The shield is potentially going to be, once a player masters it, one of the most powerful weapons in the game, is what I think. So probably don't make this one so easy to give one of the keys to it in the first room that you enter. That doesn't seem like a altogether amazing idea. So this will just be a entrance room with a few enemies in it. Just a relatively simple room. Can just keep that a decent size like this. Which can then maybe just sketching out some ideas. We can have some connecting that up. And let's say for now that we'll also make a hallway to connect it up so that they're not connected directly. Gives us a little bit of extra room to make fun stuff with. So let's do that. I really hate that my USB cord is fucked. Just need to order a new micro USB. I really hate that. Making lines like this is very easy. Making lines like this I suck at. But just drawing them quicker definitely does help. So let's just draw in a couple of lines there. Make a hallway. I don't think we're going to have any directions to go in this way necessarily. But we do want to make another direction to go into at the other side. So let's erase a little bit out of that. There we go. Which that then, let's make that lead into a room here. And this will be the platforming room, because it's a... how many rooms do we have in the other dungeon? Because it's a lot more, right? Yeah, they're a lot smaller, each one of them. So we've got like the entrance, and we've got two hallways, and we've got just a connecting room. The combat trial, we've got like the balcony room. This also is just a connecting room. We've got a T-split hallway, another T-split, optional room up there. I feel like I should be making more like just connectivity rooms, to be honest. Because what I was thinking is we can just make like this, maybe the platforming room for this one. So we can do like, connect them up like that. And do some platforming here. Also have it connect up to the red dungeon through there. And then also force the player to platform their way through, regardless of if they already have the key or if they're going to go for the key or not. If we force the player to platform through in order to get to this other part of the dungeon, that might be a nice thing. That gives us two different routes in the platforming room itself, adds a little bit of complexity to that level, which I probably think is a good thing. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to go with for now. And let's not do a hallway after every room, because that'll get tedious very quickly. So let's just make this lead right into a very badly drawn other room as well. And realistically speaking, we need to connect this room up to the combat trial as well. Otherwise, it is just a wider hallway. Like, we need to make sure that there is a distinct difference between a hallway and a room in most cases. That is more complex than just the width, right? If it's just a wider hallway, I don't think that really works that well. So let's connect these up as well, like that. And then we'll just put some enemies and a little bit of platforming, just a little bit of fun in here, is what I'm thinking. So probably, I mean, like, this is literally just a hallway. It's actually really annoying me, the fact that this looks so shit. So let's draw that a little bit better. Again, these horizontal lines are fucking killing me. As is the fact that every line is a separate, like, asset. I know that's how vector art works, and I'm kind of using this like Photoshop instead of Illustrator, which is definitely the problem. But I like being able to just draw in like Photoshop for brainstorming purposes, but I also like the fact that they're actually vectors, so I can keep infinitely zooming in. Okay, so to keep things non-confusing, let's remove the platforming that I wrote down here, because otherwise I'm going to get mixed up. There we go. And we'll draw another key somewhere in here. Let's just do it in the middle. I don't really give a shit. And we'll call this one platforming. Plat F, that works for me. Which means that we only need the minigame at this point. So, what are we going to do about that? We could add a little bit of like verticality to the dungeon, which is going to be hard to make visible on a map. Is the only issue. But what I'm thinking we could maybe do, holy shit. What I'm thinking we could maybe do is actually add in like the minigame room, like here. Right. That works. And then add in what is effectively a hallway here into a underground passage that goes into this. I don't know how I'm going to visualize that yet. To make sure that I remember what the hell I was thinking when I drew this. Because a lot of this is going to be like months in the future by the time I actually get to making it. But I suppose I can just like draw a stair step here. And then draw a stair step here and connect them up with a... that doesn't look that good. Do we have any ways of just saying, hey, we want to like do this, but now I want to make those lines... like now I want to make dashes out of those lines. Dashes, yes. It seems like that might be a thing that we can do. Maybe I just need to select that line first. I don't know how any of this shit works. We're figuring this out together, okay? Let's try to select whatever the hell this is. No, not that. We want to select this. And can we just move around like these points? Curious about that. Oh, we can. It's actually quite nice. It's not what I'm looking for. I don't know why I can't seem to add dashes to this. Oh, I think I know why. Maybe no, that doesn't make sense. I was thinking I'm drawing like a full shape, not just a line, and I think that might still be what it is. So we're not going to worry about that. What we're going to do is we're just going to remove this line. Eventually. There we go. Re-add those stair steps. And what we'll just do is we will draw this at a lower opacity instead. So can we just like pull this down or something? There, we can pull it down. Okay. We can just set it at 50% opacity and that'll do for now. And I'm still going to be removing the lines from here, just to make sure that it's really obvious that this is under the rest. If at this point I can't wrap my head around what this means anymore in like a month or like a couple of months time, that's entirely on me, right? That's then just my issue. It's entirely either way because I'm the one drawing this shit now. But that gives us a opportunity to then like move like down here, which yes, there still is a hallway, but it's a little bit more interesting because this will have some more verticality to it. It'll be a thing that you mostly will just be able to jump down on the way down, but then on the way back up, you'll need to do a little bit more platforming is what I'm thinking. But that does make me think, like, checkpoint wise, right? Or save point wise. Do I want to put a save point in here? Because if I don't, we could end up with something interesting where like the last save point is in here and you make your way all the way through here. This portion of which, the underground portion, being relatively easy. And then you do the minigame here, and then you have to make your way back to the save point. And if you die in the meantime, you need to redo all that shit, including the minigame, which could be annoying, but could also make a little bit more challenging. But that would mean that, and I probably need to do this anyway, make it so that these save points also reset the key, or wait, when you die without a save point. The key you might have picked up needs to be reset. I don't think I have that implemented yet. That's just generally a good thing to keep in mind as well. Either way, let's put in the key. Oh, let's actually make sure that our stroke is back at 100% opacity. There we go. Why is it... There we go. I was going to say, why is it so thin? Do I have, like, pressure sensitivity for the thickness? Do I? I don't think I do. It seems like I might. Yeah, I do. Okay. It's just a little bit of experimentation. mini... Man, that arm is messed up. I don't know what happened there. Mini game. That'll do. I don't yet know what I'm going to do with the minigame for any of these dungeons, because the whole minigame idea is relatively new. I do want it to be thematically cohesive with the rest of like the dungeon. So this will be the armory. So what we'll likely do here is something along the lines of like hammering armor on anvil or something. Maybe something where you have to like those little mobile games where you have to do the like burger orders, right? You have to this guy wants a burger with tomato, so burger, tomato, give him the burger with tomato, and so on and so on. Maybe do something like that with like sorting armor pieces, something relatively simple like that. We'll have to figure it out as we get a little bit closer to that. But now, how many rooms does this dungeon have in total? We've got the entry, we've got 2 hallways, we've got 3 trials, so that is 6 so far. Then we've got 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 in total, compared to, and that's including the hallways, compared to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So that's 3 less. And it's also a little bit more linear altogether in this case, I feel. The entry to the dungeon itself is more off to the side in this case, which actually now for the Reaper dungeon, it's also kind of off to the side, because you have to go to here, then through this. You do have this like T-split in there, I suppose, but still pretty off to the side. This one more so though, definitely, without a doubt. So I think this is a decent dungeon, really. And I also think that making them a little bit more like this size, like if all the dungeons have 3 less rooms, right? That's 3 less rooms of potential fun and gameplay, but it's also 3 less rooms that I have to make. And if I have to make 3 less rooms for every dungeon going forward, that then ends up with 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 less rooms in total over the entire game that I have to make, which is decent. I mean, some of them may have a little bit more than what I have for this armory right now. But I do think that that is not half bad. So I don't think I need to start adding extra rooms here. Just for shits and giggles. If I really, really wanted to, what I could do is I could add some optional objective in a room off to the side here. Like something like this. Maybe that could even connect up to the red dungeon. I already have a connection to the red dungeon though, so I don't really think I necessarily need that. And I would definitely want to have that connection to the red dungeon in here or in here, because otherwise these become just fancy hallways. So we can make a little something in there, which... Let's also try to avoid making these T split hallways too much, because I think that they're a little bit on the cheap side. Just a little too easy, a little too obvious. While if I make the... That's not how that works. If I make the splits happen in here, and we add in a little bit more like hallway, just like that, something along those lines, that makes a little bit more of an interesting shape for this as well. And it gives a bit to explore, right? Because people will have to go past this a little split here before they go into this. And I think it's likely that if you're running to what is essentially a hallway, because let's face it, it still is, and you come to this split over here, you see a split off portion of the hallway. Me personally, I would first go explore this and then move on the straight path, because usually the straight path is what leads to progression, which in this case also ends up being true. And then we have an optional objective here. So that's actually like quite inviting in some way. And people who just want to barrel straight ahead, they can, and that'll work. So I actually think that this is a pretty good idea. And then I can put some extra experience in here or something like that. It's a little annoying making a game without an item system, because you can't just give people a good item for doing optional stuff. The only real thing that you can do is maybe give them a more strategic checkpoint location, which that is actually a really good idea. That's actually a pretty good idea, putting a checkpoint there. Is that a particularly strategic place for a checkpoint though? I don't really think it is, because logically speaking, I'm always going to put a checkpoint in the combat trial itself, because I want people to be able to go into the combat trial at full HP and full mana. Just to have things feel fair. That's one of the things that I like in a certain way about the Dark Souls games, but also is quite infuriating to me in some cases, is that you have to go through a bit of like normal level, and then you get to the boss and you don't get an opportunity to heal. Meaning that the boss itself is like part of a level and not a challenge in and of itself. And there's definitely arguments to be made there, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of good arguments to be made for that being usually maybe preferable. I also think that it can be really annoying if you're stuck on a boss, which is... I'm not making Dark Souls, let's be clear here. But there's some Dark Souls inspirations to a certain degree. If you're stuck on a boss, which is very much what Dark Souls does, is getting people stuck on bosses, having to go through the same bit of gameplay again and again and again, at some point you're doing the gameplay portion of it near perfectly, and it just gets tedious, and I don't want that to happen. The other side of that, of course, being that if you get more perfect, but then we need to decide like 1 or 2 more places to put checkpoints in here. And realistically speaking, you probably want one... let's mark those with axes, actually, like with little axes. So we have an axe there. Realistically, we're going to want to have a checkpoint before the actual boss fight itself, for similar reasons. Which will only have 1 room in between. So those are pretty close together. Potentially we can make a extra room in here somewhere as well. Just to have the idea that there's more than just a hallway between. Because if there's just a hallway between, it feels maybe a little too close together. Then of course we do have like a checkpoint in here itself. Yeah. So we can get to this checkpoint relatively quickly and easily. And then... honestly, I do think that this is a pretty decent spot to put a checkpoint. Because otherwise you have to make it through this, and then the minigame. Minigames probably aren't going to be able to kill you, but you could definitely still die on the way back. And if you have the opportunity to skip part of this room and this room altogether, that would make this a decently valuable place to have a checkpoint unlock. So let's put a optional checkpoint in there as well. I do think that that is valuable. And I'll still give some bonus experience. And while we're at it, let's also mark down where the checkpoints are going to be in this. Because I have, of course, a checkpoint in the combat. Let's select the proper dungeon for this. Make sure that we're actually working inside the layer we want to be working in. We have a checkpoint in the combat trial. Then we have a checkpoint in the pre-boss room. Then I don't know where else we have checkpoints in this one, honestly. I don't think there's a lot of them. At the moment, I think we have a checkpoint in the entry room, but we're going to remove that. That's just for testing purposes. I think that might be all the checkpoints we have in this dungeon. So let's take a look if we can find any other good places for a checkpoint. I suppose having a checkpoint in this room would be potentially interesting, because that's also then a checkpoint that is immediately relatively close to the red dungeon. But if we put it in a clever place, it won't be next to the door, because I already have that room designed. At least for now, like a block out, which is probably going to be relatively close to the final layout for it. So we can put a checkpoint in there, so we have that checkpoint, but in order to use that checkpoint you have to first platform your way out of where the checkpoint is and then all the way across to even get to the red door. So it's not necessarily a great placement for entering the red dungeon if you keep dying here, but it is a possibility, which could be interesting. So then the only thing we need to do is make sure that the room that exists here is relatively likely to kill you. So you're disincentivized from using that route to a certain extent. But if you do want to use that route, you do have that checkpoint there, which could be an interesting thing to do. So let's put that down there somewhere. I don't know the exact layout of the level at the moment, because Unreal is not open. And that gives us a third checkpoint. That said, the checkpoints are very deep into the dungeon in this case. Oh, wait a second. This has two links into the red dungeon. I forgot about that. Let's just start making the red dungeon, because we've got a link into the red dungeon from yellow and from purple now. So I think this could be a interesting next one to do, even though we don't really know the theming of it yet, because again, this is supposed to be the spear, but it's just straight up not going to be. Because I don't like the idea of having a spear as one of the weapons anymore. It limits what I can do for interesting abilities, I think. So let's make red dungeon. What the hell is happening with my cursor? Okay, so that will be linking up to dungeons, which will be the first time we're linking up to dungeons. So this could be interesting. This could go very, very wrong. This could be more complicated than I thought it was going to be. But first, before we do any of that, we need to take a step back here and maybe start thinking about deciding what we want to do with the weapon choice for the red weapon. Because the red weapon is going to be weak to whatever the Warhammer ends up being. And it's going to be strong against whatever the axe ends up doing. Which is also actually a system that I need to start programming in at some point. I don't have any damage types yet. I just realized. I entirely forgot that that is a thing that I need to do. Well, we'll get to that at some point, surely. For now, though, I mean, we can just Google this real quick, see if there's any historical information on this because I'm by no means a expert on any of that. Weapons weak against... No, strong against Warhammer, I'm sorry. Good against Warhammer. Yeah, that gets me like video game stuff. Which is longswords and spears. In RimWorld, at least. Which makes a lot of sense. Which medieval weapon is best against an armored opponent? That's not really a swordsman or a hammer. That's probably going to be a hammer. Best weapon against armored monsters, fantasy writers. I mean, we can do some stuff with that. Medieval weapon. Why a sword over a warhammer? Maces? Maces are kind of similar enough to warhammers. Like, they're blunt force weapons. Let's add historical in my search query. What would have been the best weapon combined with... let's see if they have some ideas on Reddit. Yeah, we've halberds, but that's kind of the same issue. Like, I need a creative weapon. Hold on. Before we do anything else, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn down my radiator. It's getting a little warm in here. One moment. I need something that can be interesting in, like, a special ability, but also still fun to use as a normal combo move. And with a spear, the only thing that you can really do is, like, stab, right? So I can make, like, 2 or 3 stabbing animations and put those back to back. I don't think that's going to necessarily be what we really want. Let me think. Let's do this in a different way. Fantasy weapons writing Warhammer upsides. Also, maybe don't Google this. Maybe I should ask ChatGPT. Because there's some things are easier to Google, some things are easier for ChatGPT, and this is a very situational question with, like, more, like, metadata to it, like more sub information. So I think ChatGPT is going to be better here. For world building, I need some information on fantasy weapons. What would be the upsides of a Warhammer? In what situation would it be good? Armor penetration, crushing force, versatility, balanced weight distribution, minimal maintenance, battlefield, sieges and dungeon delving. And where would it be bad? What would it be bad? Crowded or confined spaces? Not for me. Speed and agility. That's a good one. That's a good one. Speed and agility. So gonna be a relatively slow kind of dude. So the spear would be usually then quick. But we already have a very quick weapon in the form of the dual swords and the default sword as well. What sort of weapons would be best to use against someone using a warhammer? You see, this kind of things with ChatGPT is really just much better. Spears and polearms, I know, but spears fucking suck. Okay, they're not interesting weapons, at least like not from a visual. Swords and shields, can't do that either. Agility and speed based weapons, which is like the dual swords. Ranged weapons, I don't want to do ranged weapons because my systems are not built for that. Unarmed combat and grappling, terrain and obstacles, that's not really... It seems like I'm going to have to be stuck with the spear. It seems like I'm going to have to be stuck with the spear. Also, let's change ideas a little bit. Like, this is the armory. I wanted to make this the training ground, but we also need a place to store weapons. We could just store weapons in a room. We don't need to make an entire like dungeon theme out of that. So what would thematically be the link between the catacombs and the forge or the armory? Something in me says this should maybe be the church, or maybe the palace. Is there anybody in YouTube chat that has an opinion? Or Twitch chat, but I sincerely doubt that one. It kind of feels logical that the catacombs, which right now don't really have any sign of religion in them from like an art direction perspective, would be next to on one of the sides something to do with like a more religiously oriented place. And honestly, I can see the spear working as a symbol of that, with it pointing up into the heavens. The entire thing, like this entire dungeon complex, the entire world of the game where it takes place is entirely underground. So there being some kind of weird like cultish religion which is obsessed with the above ground or the above would make a lot of sense. And the spear being a symbol of that that's pointing up would actually like thematically work as well. So maybe we do need to maintain the spear. I've talked myself into keeping the spear and making this a church type area, I think. So I think that's what we're gonna do. That makes sense to me. Okay, so we're not replacing the spear with anything. We're gonna keep the spear. Now, how are we going to connect the catacombs here to the armory through a church? That might be a brand new sentence. Anybody want to steal that to post it on the subreddit? I think it's r/brand new sentences. Go ahead and do so. I don't think that's been ever said before, which is just kind of what your life is like when you're making games. So what I was thinking before we got sidetracked here is that it would very possibly be interesting to make this just a fucking humongous... Okay, maybe that's a little bit of a wonky line. A absolutely humongous room which has 2 entrances from the other dungeon. I think that might be a fun way to do it. And then of course we need to have like the boss room up here, so let's draw that in. Let's also be a little bit less sloppy about the drawing of the skull. I said a little bit less, okay? Not a lot less. We then need a entry point as well. So of course we need to draw in just a relatively small room that we can enter through, like this. And then we get to the main issue, which is the actual trial rooms. This is going to be a church type area. So let's think through that for a moment. We have a combat, a platforming trial. Platforming trial is definitely going to be like if this is like a religious cult that is obsessed with going up and finding the surface, the platforming room is very obvious. It's got to be like a mine shaft that goes upward. It's got to be their efforts to reach the surface, which just goes up very, very high, which is kind of nice for me because that means that I can just make a very like narrow tube going up and just put in some platforms and call it a day. Gonna need to be a little bit more interesting than that, I think. And it would also make sense that that would be in the center of whatever happens to be like their church area. So I think that this will be our platforming challenge here. A relatively small room with a key in it, and we'll call that our platform. Very badly written. And I think for this one it makes sense that it would be accessible from all sides, because again, this is the heart of what they're after. This is the heart of what this religion is looking for. So it being accessible from all sides makes a lot of sense, because this is, everybody should be able to get to this to help achieve that goal. So I think we might close up one of these sides at some point in the future again, if it turns out that like the dungeon design just doesn't make sense connecting up on one of these sides. But for now, let's make it accessible on 4 sides, and then we'll maybe close ones back up if it ends up being necessary. That's a very loud water bottle. God damn. I don't really like the idea of the platforming just being like a mine shaft that goes up. I'm quite happy with like the accidental world building that we're doing here. Now, let's take a look at how we can enter from this side. And what is the purpose of this room? I assume that this room's purpose would be like preparing the dead to move them into the catacombs. So this would be like a mortuary, which connects these two up fairly well. Then I suppose this might be a area that like stores mining equipment, because that would logically come from the forge, right? If we get the forge, like making like big axes and stuff, maybe lanterns as well, those would probably like be stored close to it. So this just ends up being a storage room, I think. Fairly simple, but I think that makes the most sense for now. So let's go with that. So this doesn't need to be anything fancy. Doesn't need to have any trials in it. Let's just make the boss room accessible from the bottom again. And we'll put in like just a small room in between there. It's a very ugly sketch. Okay, so how do we connect these things up at this point? I think this has to be where one of the other challenges lies. So we do something a little bit like no. Oh, it's just Shift and E, not Control Shift and E. So maybe we do it like this, and then these also. Yeah, let's do. Let's do something fun here. A slightly smaller room that still has 2 openings. So we get this, and maybe we'll take out the hallway here, we'll see. Or maybe we'll add in a hallway. But if we make a slightly smaller room here, that instead of having 2 things on this side that go into another dungeon, it'll have 2 things to move through here. And then these will connect up through one singular door. Which again, adding in like a hallway there might make sense. But I want to try to avoid adding in too many things that end up just being go in one side, come out the other side. Because those are kind of difficult to make interesting. But then this same room can also have a different room attached to it, because that's how rooms work. And this can then be either the combat or the minigame trial. I'm not quite sure on that yet. But it's definitely going to be a trial room, I'll tell you that much. So let's put in a key. Which means that we're also going to get a save point in here, actually. Because we'll always do that, as we just discussed. And I think having a save point here in the middle also makes sense. Then again, we're going to have a save point right here too. So we probably actually don't want the save point there. Okay. We're making some progress. We've been at this for an hour already. Holy hell. So now we have to decide, or we could just fill in the rest of the map first for this dungeon, but we have to decide whether or not this trial up here is going to be combat or minigame, and what makes the most sense. So let's think about what that room would be in context from a world building perspective. We've got their mine shafts up to the surface over here. We've got their boss room over here. We should also think about what the boss room itself will be. Logically speaking, that will be like their pope, right? Will be their spiritual leader. So I think it makes the most sense to have the boss room itself being like their church area. Which makes sense because it is relatively close to the mine shaft. And the area in between can just be like a gathering place or something. Which the church itself is, I know, but We'll figure this out. So this then, if this is the mortuary, what the hell is this? This is just... Honestly, this is just kind of a room. I think that's what this is. And this will be their... I don't know what that'll be. Let's just let that cook for a bit. And try to decide how these connect up as well. Because here what I can see is we've done a lot of like T-splits and just hallways. Let's do like a V-shaped split here. So when we go through this door over here, what might be fun is if we make let's make a room here. Actually, I was gonna just immediately let's make a bigger room here. Spatially, I'm getting a little bit on trouble, which I know we can cheat a little bit with spaces because it's a video game, right? You can just have things spatially not make sense, and it'll be fine. You're getting teleported from one level to the other anyway. But I still do want some sense of like spatial logic. So what we'll do is when we enter this, we'll have like a V shape, very badly drawn V shape, like that. It might end up being more of a Y shape, now that I think about it. But that's one of those things that will probably end up, that's not what I wanted to do, it'll probably end up deciding like actually in engine instead of in a document like this one, because there's just too many things that could influence that decision. Anyway, then what we can do is we can open up some walls in here for some doors. Open up this wall, and frankly, so far in this dungeon, we don't really have a lot of things that are hallways yet, but we already have quite a lot of rooms, don't we? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think that's 10 and 11 if we count the hallways. Am I right? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, 11 in total. With that hallway is 12. So we've already got quite a lot in this dungeon. Remember when this dungeon over here, which we just made, looked like it might be a little small? Yeah, it feels like this one is going to be relatively much larger. So on average, we'll probably still be around the 12 to 15 rooms mark, with hallways included, of course. So I feel like we can get away with just making this a corner hallway. And that'll probably be fine. Meaning that at this point, the only way into whatever is going to be on this side of the dungeon will be through here. I don't think that's a big deal, honestly. Yeah, that's kind of fine. That works for me. Still hasn't brought me any closer to deciding whether or not this should be the combat or the puzzle trial. I feel like... Apparently I decided it was the combat trial because I just put in a checkpoint there, but I feel like it makes more sense to put the combat trial further away from the rest. Because it will have a checkpoint in it. Like, this doesn't make a lot of sense from a checkpoint perspective, right? We've got like a hallway, then a bit of a room. We might not be able to like immediately just make that path, depending on how I end up putting that room together, but still. So let's make this the puzzle room, and we'll find a like world building reason for that later. But this will be, it's not a puzzle, it's a minigame room. I keep calling it puzzle room, I think, but it's not. So this will be our mini game. And I suppose the mini game for this will be, oh, that actually also makes a very fun opportunity. The mini game for this could also be like semi-platforming, but instead of we actually like doing careful platforming, like in the platforming sections, what we could do is we could do like a trampoline minigame where we have to jump from trampoline to trampoline and get up as high as possible. And if we reach a certain height, we get the key. I really like that idea. I really do like that idea. And it still makes sense that that would be somewhat close to like the church itself and somewhat accessible from it. Yeah, let's stick with that. So then we probably just want to have like a room just hanging out here. Which maybe we want to have this as a T-split as well, just for like maneuverability. I think that, yeah, I think that's what we want. We can always get rid of like a door or two later on. Then again, we could also add like a door or two if we end up figuring out that that is not ideal. But for the time being, let's just add in some stuff here. And we'll have to try to make up something to make these a little bit less obviously like T-shaped, because for the dungeon I have built already right now, you know, this works. That's a little too obviously T-shaped. Like these hallways obviously are also very hallway shaped. But making something where, I don't know, maybe this is like, this is a path up and this is a path down. Yeah, chat's been a little dry today. You're entirely right. I'm not entirely sure why. Because people do stop by. Like the concurrent viewers drop to like 2 or 3 every so often, but sometimes it goes up to like 8 or 9. People are just not very chatty today for some reason. And then here we can have the combat trial, which adds in a fair few more rooms in between. So we can have combat trial with a checkpoint, and we'll need some room to write down here. So we have combats. I think that is a decent blueprint for the next dungeon, also kind of in place, because this dungeon feels like it's a lot closer in size and scope, and more well thought out, to be honest, to this one. This one's a little smaller. This one, I don't mind it. Just for context, putting this together, which isn't finished yet, one of the things that was an option for today's stream was finishing off like the block out at least for the last rooms of this dungeon. Putting this dungeon together with everything that goes with it, and I still don't have like the boss fights or the minigame programs, has taken me the past like 2 months or something like that. So what we've put down right now is likely gonna be like, you know, like at least 3 months of work, and we've planned that out in like an hour and a half now. Well, we haven't really planned it out, it's just general guidelines for me to follow. Mostly again for coming up with ideas and like a sense of space. Which leaves us with the second half of the entire game to fill in still. Holy shit. We might actually be able to get through most of this today in this stream, to be honest with you. Which will be neat. Because we've got this finished now. This just works straight up. Which brings us back to the Photoshop file. We still have these two to do. I don't have any themes for them yet, so we're going to have to come up with that before I actually feel comfortable putting those down for a map. This is going to be the training grounds for like the armory. Well, we have the armory here for the army, like the barracks. It's going to be here. So I guess that's the next one that we logically should do. So let's turn this thing around a little bit. Also, let's save our progress. And let's get working on the next dungeon as well. We are making some real progress. I'm not gonna lie, I've been putting off doing this for a while. But now that we're actually working on this, it feels satisfying filling in these segments that I've had just empty there for a long ass time. I don't think we're going to need another room there. Looking at it again. I think it'll be fine. So let's make the next layer. That'll be the green dungeon. Don't really care where you add that layer, to be honest with you. So, the green dungeon. Training grounds. It's the dual swords, I believe. Yes, it is. So the boss fight is specifically, I have like the gameplay mechanic for my mind already. So we need to kind of work around that. This is going to be a slightly wider boss room, and you'll see why in a moment. Because the idea behind this boss is you might be thinking, hey, he's drawing that very far over to the left. And that is because this specific dungeon has a dual boss fight. It's got two swordsmen that work together and like share an HP bar and everything. That's the idea of this boss fight. You get dual swords from it. The weapons are dual swords, but they're not being used as dual swords. They're being used as two individual swords, but still, you get the point. And if you don't, well, that's your fucking problem, isn't it? So let's just enter this one from the bottom as well. That makes it easier to like have the symmetry that I envision. Because this room has to be relatively symmetrical. And I think it would be maybe fun if this entire dungeon was very symmetrical, actually. Yeah, I think that would be kind of neat. So, symmetrical in like this axis. So this side of the dungeon and that side of the dungeon will be symmetrical to each other. At least in the like room layout. I don't know that all the rooms themselves are going to be necessarily the same, or even like the room here in the middle is going to necessarily be God damn it. Like particularly symmetrical. But one thing that I do know for sure is that we immediately want to split this into a left and a right side. And I think the left and the right side should only come together in the entry room and the room before the boss fight itself to really sell that sense of symmetry. So let's make the pre-boss room as well. So other than these two rooms, left and right are not going to be connected to each other at all. If you want to go from the left side to the right side, you need to move through one of those two specific rooms. Also, I'm getting not an important text, so you can go fuck off. Then we have a room up here, which leads us into another dungeon. So we need to draw that one in, which means that we have to have a similar room on this side. That leads into the light blue dungeon, which is more supposed to be like a turquoise kind of dungeon. Maybe it makes sense to have a central room here as well for one of the trials, because otherwise one of the two sides is going to have more trials than the other. Like, I want one of the trials on the left, one of them on the right. The other one has to be in a central room, which means that we're actually going to have 3 central rooms. But let's not have those connected up on either side. Let's have that connected up only to this room over here. So we have like a split of room, which is just tilted entirely the wrong way. To have that connected, and this is going to have a key inside it. So we have a key, and I'm thinking does it make sense? Okay, so we've got a minigame room, a combat room, and a platforming room. Does it make sense to make one of the two bosses more aggressive? The side that that guy starts out on, or is representative of at least, being the side that has the combat room, the other one being more mobile, so a little less aggressive, but also harder to catch up to and hit. And that has the platforming side, and then a middle room that is like a neutral ground between them, having the minigame room. I think that makes sense. I don't know if that's how dual swords work, but honestly, I don't really care. So let's say this is our mini game room. And with that, I think it's time for a quick bathroom break. So if anybody has to like go stock up on snacks while they're watching this or whatever, I'll be back in like a minute to fill in the rest of the dungeon. I'm really liking the idea of having this being symmetrical. And we continue on drawing this room, or this dungeon, I mean. So let's keep on going. Then I think what makes most sense here is we have every opportunity to make this semi-symmetrical along the other axis as well. So what we can do is we can, like, I'm just going to draw in the rooms first and then we'll see how we connect them up later. We can draw in like 4 more rooms here. Right, and then we can have, obviously the sizes are not very representative at the moment. I feel like I need to point out these should all be roughly the same size. And then we can have like a key in here. So this can then be like the platforming key, because it doesn't really matter which one is which, to be honest with you, in this case. So that'll be the platforming key. And then on the opposite side, on the symmetrical side, we'll do it in the other room. So this will then be the combat key. Which all makes them like line up very neatly. Now we just need to figure out how we're going to connect up these different rooms together, because what I do know is that very clearly, like this and this needs to be I was saying this and this needs to be opened up. But what we could also do to make it just a little bit more of an interesting, that's not what I want to do, a little bit more of an interesting shape is add in, select the green dungeon as a whole, like do this into that, into that, into that. This dungeon ending up being somewhat more linear in both of its paths actually doesn't bother me, because that really shows off the symmetry relatively well. And with this, it also means that you have to like go out of your way to go through this to like it's not exactly on any path, even if you're making it like doing that or doing that, you have to like make your way through everything except this middle room here, which connects up to both the minigame and the boss itself. So having to get out of your way to do that is the best, I think. So let's open up the same areas here. Which, yes, again, there's going to be a lot of hallways here. I'm going to have to come up with some interesting ways to make hallways feel a little bit more engaging than just hallways with maybe a couple of jumps in them. Because that's what I have at the moment. And I'm going to be honest with you, that's fine if it happens like a few times. But for an entire dungeon like this, yeah, maybe not. So we connect... Holy hell, I don't even know what happened there. We connect this up like that, and with this, and connect this up. Then again, this is just gonna be a... You know what? Fuck it. I'm just rotating you around so that I can do this a little bit easier. So these connect up. And now I rotate you back. I really need to, like, there is a shortcut for this, right? Shift Control Scroll, it says. It's not doing that though. It really isn't. Is it because my scroll wheel is just fucked? Is that it? Oh, no. That might just be it. I honestly don't care. Let's rotate this back around. So from that, what the fucking hell happened there? We connect that up like that and make things not glitch out, preferably. Connect these up like that, and then we can connect those up like this. And that's pretty much the layout for this dungeon. I mean, there's a lot of... We'll have to fix this up later and make this actually fun in this one, I think. Because, let's be honest here, you've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-ish, 10 actual rooms. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Holy shit, that's 19 rooms in total. I accidentally made this the biggest dungeon, I think. And it looks so fucking simple and small. But I think it's the most amount of rooms I've had so far, which you definitely wouldn't say. Did I count wrong? I must have. Hold on. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes, 8, 9, 11, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah, that's 19 in total. It's just casually 19. Half of which are hallways. But again, I just mentioned how these hallways are going to have to be a little bit more interesting than just hallways. Because there's going to be a lot of them, specifically in this dungeon. Like, there's other dungeons that also have a few hallways, but this is a lot. But I do think that is... It makes the point of this dungeon as a whole stronger, with like the symmetry, the dual swords. I do like that. So that means that we're over halfway through in map design now. At least rough block out map design. There's a lot of details needed to be added in the future. Why the hell is this such a big selection? I don't know. Okay. Leaving us with 2 last dungeons to do. But these last dungeons are going to be the issue because I don't really have any thematic reasoning for them yet. We need to tie up the themes going from the training grounds to the cemetery. I think this should be the living quarters, which kind of is what the barracks would be, but let's split that up. Because this is right the way across from the religion center as well, so people can just cross through the middle and end up at like their church and do their like praying to the surface gods or whatever. So that makes sense to me. And you wouldn't want to have the like living quarters next to what is essentially the cemetery. Or I suppose since it's next to a religious place, it would be the graveyard. It's a catacomb, that's what it is. But then how do we get from living quarters to catacombs? Like, what is the thematic... the thematic like link between those? Let's ask ChatGPT. I'm making a I'm doing some world building and need to connect up two areas. One area is a graveyard or catacombs, and the other area is the living quarters for the people that live in this area. What could I put in between to bridge these two areas thematically? Garden pathway, memorial hall, art installation, symbolic lighting, what the fuck, mural and mosaic, architectural features, interactive installations. That is the worst list that I could have imagined. Okay, let's try something else. Instead, actually, maybe I should just show you this. Probably more fun if you can read with me on this. Probably should have done that for the last one as well. Instead, let's say we have what do we have actually? We have barracks or a training area for the warriors, and there are two areas between that and the catacombs. How can I theme those two areas to bridge the thematic gap? It's going to say something like an infirmary or a hospital. Not even. Okay. A passage that serves as a transit from a warrior's domain into the realm of the dead. No. Let's have it regenerate just for like a new ID. Ritual grounds. That's kind of too close to the religious thing that I have already. Guardian's Passage. I don't like the Guardian's Passage ID because there's one of the themes should be close to the barracks and fit with that. The other should fit with the catacombs, but the two themes also have to be able to fit together. Yeah, I don't think ChatGPT is gonna help me here. I do like the idea that I came up with the like infirmary. Like a hospital kind of wing. But how the hell does a hospital have anything to do with a axe or a warhammer? Like, it also needs to tie into the weapons in some way. I guess you can say that the axe is used for amputating limbs. You could do some real cool shit with that, admittedly. Having like an enemy that's just like a leg and an enemy that's just like an arm. I kind of like that idea, to be honest with you. I kind of like that idea. The fact that that's like a hospital area because it's next to the training grounds. And it's on its way to the catacombs. And you could do some really fun stuff with that, as far as like enemy IDs and enemy themes go. So let's go with that. Yes, let's go with that. But then we also, before we decide that we're gonna do that, I also need to have some theme for the last remaining dungeon as well. And it might be a good idea to not fill in those last remaining 2 dungeons for now and just start like writing a little bit as well on like the world building stuff, because I don't think I have all of like the world lore written down in one place anywhere. And now that we're starting to come up with a little bit more of it as well, I think that I probably should start putting that down somewhere too. But let's ask ChatGPT again, because okay, so the area next to the barracks is going to be a hospital area, but now I still need to link together the hospital with the catacombs. What could I do with that in between area? It also needs to relate in theme to a Warhammer. I don't think ChatGPT is gonna do a lot with this, to be honest with you. The Path of Redemption, Sanctuary of Healing, Field Hospitals, Sacred Springs, Healing Gardens, Vigilant Guardians, Abyssal Passage. I mean, we could do something with that. We could do something with like a heaven and hell kind of theme. Sort of a limbo. Like between life and death. Because of course the catacombs very much are death. And the hospital is, well, technically still alive. So the transition between that being alive and then dying, like what would happen in between there, and what would happen in between would be like thematically something to do with like the underworld. So we could do like the like harkening to the like Egyptian mythology, where the ride into the underworld is literally a ride, right? On a boat. But I don't really think that I necessarily want to involve too much like actual real world mythology in this, because I'm building up quite a bit of like symbolism and in-world religion. So let's try to think about that a little bit more. What we have is we have a religion that believes in a there we go. We have this religion over here which believes in a world above ground. They all exist underground. They believe in a world above ground. How would a religion like that deal with somebody dying? They don't bury them, which works out with the catacombs that I have, because there's a lot of just skulls laying around. So that kind of clicks together very well. So they don't bury them. They just put them like in those, well, with casket and all, like into their catacombs. That works. Would they have like rituals to do with that though? And wouldn't it potentially make more sense for whatever that ritual is to be happening between these two? But then you would have the... Well, and then you would have the hospital actually right next to the catacombs itself. So... how easy is it for me to move things over and make the scythe the blue weapon? How does that impact like the balancing of the effectiveness as well? If we change these two around and we make the scythe the blue weapon, that still works with that, and those two are next to each other. I don't think I like that. No, let's not do that. Like thematically, all these need to be next to each other because we have that set up now. These can be split if we have like the journey into the afterlife in between the catacombs and the actual... Oh no, but they... no. Because I do still think that it's nice to have the journey into the afterlife as a transition from a hospital to the catacombs. I think this is going to need a little bit more deliberation time to make a decision on. I feel like we've got something here. We've got a good direction. But before I... At least, like, I can start working on this one. Pretty soon. And I could do that right now, actually. But before we finish off with the last one, I need to have the themes for that a little bit more solidly in my mind. So maybe we hold off on that one for now, and we just do the hospital, which is... Confused. Why are you coloring? I did see the title, but I don't understand. Because all my dungeons are color coded is really the easiest answer to give there. Yeah. Okay. So let's make the... I'm just gonna call it a light blue dungeon. I know it's technically turquoise, but I don't like spelling things. Light blue dungeon. And let's rotate. Oh, that's zooming. That's not rotating. Let's rotate. Making a lot of progress here in the mapping out of the dungeons, though. So, logically speaking, again, dungeon boss. The fuck all the way up there. That makes sense. Let's put that guy... I hate that it doesn't let me make a full path. It's kind of annoying. But it'll do. So, boss fights up there. We need to have a room connecting up to this, or a hallway or whatever, but let's just do a room for now. We need to have a room down here to be the entrance. And then we need to make a shitload more stuff for those to connect up. So, the themes for this one. It feels like this room here is going to be the place where like the dismemberments happen. Like, this is the amputation room. So the boss fight here is likely going to be some sort of doctor, I feel. So how do we build from that? Let's have the room. It's a little unbalanced maybe, but if we have the room that goes into the boss fight on this side, that at least makes things a little bit different. And this one can be like lined with hospital beds or something like that. I don't know if it's the creativity or the caffeine running out, but I feel like I'm having a harder time coming up with, or maybe this is just more difficult, but I feel like I'm having a harder time coming up with good ideas for this dungeon so far. Let's make sure first and foremost that the passage into the next dungeon is not up here again, but more in the middle to somewhere down here as well. If we don't have a good like lore reason for something, let's at least think about this from like a game design perspective. And then at that point, I think it makes sense to have a trial room here. Keep forgetting that I'm not allowed to do that apparently. So we have a trial room down here. Let's actually make for a change the combat room the one at the start of the dungeon, because it will be the furthest away from the place where the actual like injured people end up. Which sounds counterintuitive if you have no context. But I swear it makes sense. At least in my mind. That is a horrible bee. Then the platforming and the minigame room. What are we gonna do for those? I don't really know. I think I'm hitting a bit of a roadblock today. So let's leave that for what it is right now and start thinking about the last dungeon, because we didn't actually put our checkpoint locations in there yet, which obviously we do want to do. So we do one before the boss room, we do one in the combat room, and then I suppose for a sense of like diagonal symmetry, we do one in the platforming room. There's a lot of in-between rooms here, so maybe we want to have another one somewhere. For now, I think this makes the most sense. Also, let's save our progress. I think we're going to leave it there for right now. I think we've made like we've made a little shit of progress. We started this stream like 2 hours ago with only having the like map blueprints for the purple, and we've added 3 whole dungeons and started on the 4th, and after that we only have 1 left. That said, there might be a final boss dungeon as well, which is going to be like a large dungeon. But that is one of those things where I'm going to finish the entire game first, and if we're going to add that, that's going to be... I'm not going to even start designing that until the rest of the game, at least in like a MVP state, is done. So even designing that is like a year away, at the very least. So that is potentially a plan. But that's not something that really I want to worry about right now. Because all of the stuff that I'm going to learn, putting all of this into practice here, I want to be able to like have that from the get-go, designing that final dungeon. So that I don't have to... because it's going to be so large. It's not going to be the entire size of the game again, but... where these dungeons are like between 10 and 15 rooms, I'm expecting that one to be like 20 rooms or something like that. Like significantly larger. I might also just end up deciding not to do that. Kind of depends on a lot of factors. But for now, I think let's end off the stream. It's been a little bit of a short one, but man, I've had a rough week. I'm surprised we even made this much progress here today, to be honest with you. So... thanks everybody who stopped by, and even if the chat was kind of dead during this entire thing, I feel like I made a lot of progress. I was very productive, and I hope that you guys enjoyed watching. I'll be back on Friday. This time I'll actually be back on Friday. Last Friday I kind of forgot that Avatar The Last Airbender live action release, and I wanted to watch that. And I made like a shit ton of content on that on the podcast channel, which is called We'll Get To That. They're being released daily now, so... I put in a lot of work on that, and then we had a podcast recording for Kingdom Hearts over the weekend, and again, it's been a rough week, so I'm going to cut this one a little bit short. Friday we'll be back, and maybe we'll be finishing this. I feel like I'll be finishing this throughout the week in my own time, and we'll probably do some like programming stuff if my brain isn't entirely too fried for that on Friday. So, see ya.